and we'll just get this set up. Should we?
Later.
Thanks. All right, good evening everyone. My name is Elisabeth, and a few of you know me from my past life in Brisbane. For 9 years. I worked with these guys and with this guy. So I had a really nice time, and with you. I thought you looked familiar, wasn't totally sure. So I'm actually just back for holiday, the first time since 8 years, and I'm just interrupting my holiday for to talk about this since it's World Water Day today. And Rowan Barber, who was sitting over there, who's gone somewhere, back to work. Oh no. Well, he actually got me into this because we're both on Facebook with the Sustainable Sanitation Alliance, and we sort of talked about my visit, and then he said, can you give a presentation? So that's what I'm doing now. And the topic is urine diversion dehydration toilets for sustainable sanitation in developing countries. I think it fits quite well as after the one from Barry, because he's already given a lot of the fundamentals of urine diversion, and I can just build on that. My topic is though geared towards developing countries. So I'm not so sure whether the audience here is more interested in the urine diversion or in the developing countries, but we'll see. I'll just do what I've prepared here. So this is where I work, in Frankfurt. The organization was called GTZ. We've now got a name changed to GIZ because it was merged with 2 other organizations. And basically, GIZ is a company owned by the German government. It's pretty big. So this shows here the turnover, the annual turnover, 764 million euros. And the main client is this one ministry called BMZ, which is the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. We actually have a ministry for that. Lots of other countries don't have a separate ministry for development cooperation. It's often connected to foreign office or something. And then there's also other clients like World Bank and European Commission. So we do work for those clients as well. And the partner countries of the German Development Cooperation are shown here in red. A lot in Sub-Saharan Africa and India, China, although that's kind of phasing out a bit since these are no longer so much in need, these countries. What I find interesting is that there's some delegated cooperation with AusAid just starting. There's something in the Philippines which is called Fit for Schools, very exciting program which is now co-financed by AusAid, and also in Zambia it's just starting up, and in the Southern African region. So apparently what happened is our Chancellor actually met with your Prime Minister when you still had the other guy, what was his name? Karen Rudd, yeah. And they talked about cooperating, and then, so I think it's quite nice. So Germany and Australia are cooperating in the water and sanitation sector in Sub-Saharan Africa and in the Philippines. And we'll see what comes out of it. We've got a lot of offices around the world. It's about 17,000 staff, of which 90% of that staff is local staff. So it's only a few thousand Germans and then all the national staff. So at GIZ there's a program called Sustainable Sanitation Ecosan, and I lead that program since 3 years. It's 6 people that I lead, and this is what we do. The first we have the Secretariat of the Sustainable Sanitation Alliance, which is an alliance of about 140 partner organizations, also some Australian organizations in there. I've actually put a little bit of information material over there, and hopefully I don't have to carry anything back, so take what's there. We also support sanitation projects of German Development Corporation, knowledge management, awareness raising, advice to German government. And then there is this so-called Sanitation project, which is in our headquarters. We have our own research and demonstration project. So it's a bit separate. It's actually funded by a different ministry, so I've put in a different color. But if you're interested in the whole urine diversion and struvite production, then you should go to that website because it's all there. It's a very interesting project. So this is actually the struvite that we make there. And I could give a whole presentation just about this Sanitation project, and maybe that would have been more interesting for you, I don't know. Basically, as you said, you can make struvite out of urine. So this is from urine. Could even be my urine in there because it is our office building. Magnesium ammonium phosphate, and 1 liter of urine contains 0.8 gram of magnesium ammonium phosphate. Yeah, I'll just pass that around. So we've actually got a reactor in the cellar which is made by a German company, Huber, who've got some experience with that. So if anyone needs to produce struvite from urine, there's a company that has a reactor which you can buy if you want. Now, in terms of the drivers for improving sanitation, there's 2 separate drivers why we want to improve sanitation. And the work we do is more on this side, and what we've just heard is perhaps more on this side. So in the industrialized countries, the drivers for improving sanitation is to reduce environmental pollution and save resources, water, phosphorus, fertilizer. Phosphorus being a limited resource that is being mined and it's running out. Most of you know, sooner or later, like about 50 years, the cheap sources of phosphorus will be depleted and we will turn to urine as one alternative for phosphorus. So then the other driver is to improve public health, especially for children. And this is the main driver in developing countries. And I would say it used to also be the main driver in our countries in the past. If you just go back 150 years, we had also very high child mortality, and then the whole sewer system came in and helped to reduce that. Just some photos, what it looks like for about 2.6 billion people around the world. Very filthy conditions. No toilets, people do open defecation or pit latrines, flies everywhere. So basically, the Millennium Development Goal number 7 had as its target to reduce by half the number of people that have no access to basic sanitation. And this is what it looks like. There's a child right in the middle, defecating into that stream, and you can just imagine the health risks that this child is facing there. So this is what we deal with. You know, we have urban slums. It's getting worse. More and more, the urban slums are growing, and the sanitation situation is totally disastrous there, often. Another example from the Philippines. So I think it's extremely important to just remember the link between sanitation and health. MDG 4, Millennium Development Goal number 4, is actually to reduce the child mortality. And both of those goals, the goal for sanitation and the one for child mortality, are very much off track, which means by the year 2015 they're not going to be reached. And I don't think it's a coincidence that they're both looking so badly. They're actually linked so much. These numbers you've perhaps seen before. 1.8 million children die every year due to diarrhea, and the main cause of the diarrhea is inadequate sanitation and unsafe water. In terms of morbidity, yeah, okay, that's what I just said. 88% of diarrhea cases are caused by unsafe water, inadequate sanitation, and poor hygiene. See that this is going on right now. It's a total scandal, actually, that we're letting this happen. These diseases, these diarrhea and intestinal worms, this is showing the intestinal worms as a symbol, is affecting one's ability to learn, and they're missing school days, and they can't concentrate. They have, you can imagine when you're weak because of diarrhea coupled with malnutrition, they might have built a school, might have even given you teachers, but you're just not really able to learn properly. And ultimately this even has an effect on the intelligence. This is controversial, but intuitively it makes sense. So this graph came out recently, and you've got here on this axis the disease burden, infectious diseases, and then on that axis the IQ, and these are all different countries. So in those countries where the disease burden is high, the IQ is lower of the population. As I say, it is controversial, but you can argue about the exact numbers, but it's basically obvious if you have a child that has constantly diarrhea and not enough food and can't take up the food properly, it's going to affect the brain development in an irreversible manner. So even if later you give it good food, it's irreversible, and it already starts in the womb. Obviously, if a pregnant woman is sick a lot, then the baby won't be able to develop to its fullest potential. Okay, so that was the part on the health. So it's clear that sanitation is crucial for child health. And now the question is, okay, what kind of sanitation are we looking at? There's a definition for sustainable sanitation, and it's quite similar to what we saw in the first presentation. These different criteria that need to be met, and they all need to be met in order for the project to succeed. So it's to do with health and hygiene, environmental and natural resources, technology and operation, finance and economics, socio-cultural and institutional. You can imagine it's not easy to meet all of these criteria in a very, very good fashion, and often the technology is actually the easy part. We have maybe really great technology, but often it's too expensive or there's no institutional support for it. Now, there's another term that is maybe familiar to some of you. It's called ecological sanitation, which is basically similar to sustainable sanitation, but it has a focus on reusing the nutrients, like what you just talked about. It's about closing the loop between sanitation and agriculture, because water is not actually a resource, provided that you destroy the pathogens. So the excreta have, especially the feces, have pathogens. You have to do something to destroy them. Once you've done that, you can use it in agriculture and produce food. And there's WHO guidelines that describe very well what can be done here with to destroy the pathogens, to make it safe. This is a matrix we've put together to show that there's many different technologies that can be used within sustainable sanitation. So these columns are the different waste streams. So there's organic waste, feces, urine, grey water and rainwater. And then on the top is technologies for collection, in the middle is for treatment, and at the bottom is for use. And I've marked one in red, and that's the one I will just talk a bit more on in the remaining 5 minutes. It's called urine diversion, in short, UDDTs. So they're similar to the ones that you use in Currumbin, but they don't use anything. So they also separate and they keep everything dry. I'll just pass around this model of a pedestal type urine diversion toilet. This is just from the Philippines, where there's a very active NGO who's promoting it, and there's quite a few of them already installed. So what are the advantages of keeping urine and feces separate? Some of them are the same as what Barry said, but some of them are different, because now we're talking about a dry system without flush water. One of them is you can actually kill the pathogens in feces quite easily by just drying them out. When feces dry for a year, the pathogens die off because they need moisture to survive. The other thing is it reduces odor to near zero. This is now compared to a pit latrine. In a pit latrine, everything goes in together and it's always smelling. But when you keep it separate, the toilet can actually be indoors because it no longer smells. And I can vouch for that because I have one of them at home. I can show you a picture later. So the other advantage is you don't need any water for flushing. In many countries, water is scarce, and the poor people have anyway no access to running water. You don't produce a wet fecal sludge. You can produce fertilizer and soil conditioner quite easily, and the toilet can be built in any floor of the building. You no longer have to have it connected to the ground. Again, this is comparing with a pit latrine. So how does it work? This is the seat. Urine goes here, feces goes there. Again, for the males, you can have a urinal if you want. It's actually a good idea, so that when they urinate only, they can use the urinal. And they can use it standing if they want, but sitting is also encouraged. Anal wash water, very important for those cultures where people use water for anal washing. They have another hole where the anal wash water is collected. No water for flushing. The feces drop straight down into a bucket, container or vault. Then there is a ventilation pipe from the feces compartment for drying of feces. After each defecation, then some covering material is added, for example, ash or sand, so 1 scoop of covering material. The urine is stored for some weeks to kill pathogens, and the thing is sterile out of the bladder of a healthy individual. So that's the official explanation about sterile or not. But you're right, you have to be careful because there can also be cross-contamination. So if people are not careful, maybe some feces end up in the wrong hole. So just to keep that in mind, but in general, urine is much less dangerous than feces. So this is an example from India, where this is also going really well. There's many projects. We have a list of projects in India. I've stopped counting because they just spring up everywhere. This is for people who use squatting toilets. So they put their feet there and squat, and then the urine goes there, feces there, and then they have to move a little bit backwards to the anal washing area. And early on we had that conversation about moving or not, but it has been shown that it's not asking too much for people to shuffle a little bit back. These are some toilet blocks that GIZ has been involved in building in Kenya for schools. And then I've got some photos from Peru, where we had a public-private partnership. And these UDDTs are very interesting because they use a bench type, so you don't need any stairs. It's just a variation on the design. And this is at a school, and they've put a lot of effort into making the beautiful toilets, but not very expensive. Like the tiling there is done by the house owners, so it's not mandatory, but I think it's actually important that the toilet looks good. Some more examples from indoor toilets, so that's just integrated into the bathroom. And, they've experimented with different building materials. So this is a material called adobe, which works very well and is very cheap. So you can build them expensive or cheap depending on what the users can afford and what's available locally. Now, I promised to show you my own toilet. This is what it looks like. There's a company called Separet in Sweden. They've been marketing this toilet, and I think it's a really good product. They've sold, I once asked them, 70,000 or so, because in Sweden they have these summer houses which are not connected to the sewer. Many Swedes have summer houses, and they used to have these outhouses for toilets, but now they're using these instead. So you can find it easily with Google. So this is, when you sit down here, then this flap moves to the side. The flap, this blue thing that reflected the flash when I took the photo, that's just a visual thing that you can't see anything when you first get there. So you sit down and that moves to the side, and then underneath is just a bucket. And you can lift this up to get the bucket out, and then there's a fan in there and a ventilation pipe, and I've got the fan on a timer. You can see the timer at the top. And then here we collect the urine, and we've got a separate urinal to collect the urine from the men. And it works very well, and it doesn't smell, and it's just an example. I wouldn't recommend this for developing countries, but it just shows how fancy it can be, and that it's no longer some crazy technology. It's pretty well established, I would say. Now again, with the reuse of urine as fertilizer, there's lots of demonstrations. There's no doubt it is a fertilizer. It works very well. And again, I could have talked a long time about the fertilizer, but I won't. I'll just show you the one slide, which was from Zimbabwe. So on the left-hand side is maize that wasn't fertilized, and on the right it's been fertilized with urine. And it's been found that because the urine is rich in nitrogen, it works particularly well for plants that need nitrogen. And these are the green leafy plants. So this one responds very well to urine treatment, and also spinach, for example, and any other plant that has big green leaves. So if you're interested in that, I can show you literature. There's lots out there, and it's a really important thing for African countries where the soil fertility is low, and you have farmers who can't afford fertilizers, you have families who are malnourished. So it is a really great thing if you can kill two birds with one stone. You have the sanitation improved and also the nutrition improved because of the fertilizer. So this is my last slide. 2 take-home messages. Sanitation is crucial for the health of children under 5. Well, particularly for the children under 5, but also for older children. And if you're implementing any sanitation projects, don't just think of pit latrines or flush toilets. There's another alternative, the UDDT, which I think is definitely worth considering. So, thanks for your attention.
Again, are there any questions for before? Yeah.
Just a quick question. When you remove the bucket from your toilet, what do you do with that?
Okay, I've got a photo for that in the appendix. These were all the slides I could have had. Just hang on a moment. Yeah. So in my garden I have 2 composters. This is what they look like empty, and this is when it was started to be filled. So I put the feces and the toilet paper go in here. Sorry, this is still in German. Also the kitchen waste and the garden waste. The feces you can't see after a short while. It's the kitchen waste you can see much longer, like the banana peels or so, but the feces and the toilet paper is just so quickly composted. So we filled up one in 1 year, and then we started using the other one. So this one has been for 2 years now, and we're just seeing if we want to already use it in the garden. We have only a small garden. We could also put it into in Germany we have these bio bins where people can put their organic waste. So we could put it in there. But if you have a bigger garden, then the composting works really well.
Could it be combined with a worm farm?
Yeah, definitely.
So in a developing country application, what do they do? Do they vacuum it out, or?
No, and you can't vacuum it because it's not liquid.
The excrete of the fecal.
Yeah. In context, you normally let it dry.
Yeah.
It depends. You can either. Depends how big you make the storage.
Yes.
If you make the storage quite big, you can, and sometimes they also have 2 vaults where you switch over to the second vault. So once it's been dried for 2 years, it can immediately be used as a soil conditioner. What you do is you lift the topsoil a bit, you put it in, and you put soil back on top, and then it's safe. And, yeah.
After 2 years, it feels like soil.
So
I've actually held
So it acts like a septic tank, like you have to have that kind of a volume.
No, not so big.
Okay.
What
No,
we normally have is a couple of, I've noticed, we put right in the middle, one here, and one there, and then they piggyback go for a while, and then it spills up, they take everything out.
The volume of feces is surprisingly small. We're used to these big volumes because we dilute it with a lot of water. But feces is actually 50 kilos per person per year. That's wet. And 80% is water. So after drying, you end up with 20 kilos. So it's like 1 backpack full of feces per year per person. It is a small amount. When you compare it with solid waste, you produce much more solid waste than that. And the solid waste, we have no problem getting it out with the solid waste collection. So it becomes a logistical problem. How do I now move a solid substance from A to B? And well, you no longer use pipes and water to transport it. But I just thought I'd show this photo quickly too, because we're very proud of it. So this is when this urine that what we do in our demonstration project, we have urine and struvite. So we do fertilizer trials with both the different fertilizers. So this was just applying the urine to the field and growing wheat and this was in the wheat harvest. Our problem was that they did it on a soil that was very fertile, so there was hardly any difference between urine fertilized and mineral fertilizer. So we need to try and find a soil that is poorer so that you can see the difference when you fertilize with urine or you don't fertilize.
Any more questions for Elisabeth?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, when you said that the toilets can be done, UDDTs in a developing country, that they can be done cheaply or they can be done expensive. When you say cheap, what do you mean by cheap? Like what's the sort of cost?
Yeah, I mean, these ones that I showed, this Adobe, it's probably the cheapest one so far. I always say it can be dirt cheap, basically, because look, they've taken a funnel. This is actually just a funnel, which they've cut a little bit, and they've put onto something. I mean, you can, there's no limit to your imagination what materials you could use. You know, you can have some bucket and a funnel, and then that's your toilet. But okay, that doesn't look so nice, but that would be, let's say, 5-10 Australian dollars. You know. But then if you do a fancy one, like what I showed you, that's a bit more. And then this one was too expensive. The whole thing was 500 euro, which is 100 Australian dollars, roughly. Yeah. So.
I saw a photograph of one that was actually cut off milk bottle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, what we found is you have to work closely with the users, because there's also this aspect of being proud of it and feeling special about it. So if it looks too cut off milk bottle plastic thing, you know, that's the disadvantage. Then people might not like it. But if you say to them, well, you can do it like this, then it's, or you could do it like this. And the funny thing is, I think they are often willing to spend a little bit more to make it look nice. But it's important that, let's say, if you come with German money or European money, you don't suddenly build things that are way too expensive for what people could then replicate. What you really want is, you build a demonstration perhaps, but they replicate it with their own means.
So usually if you go into a community and you want people to start adopting these kinds of systems, you usually do a demonstration toilet and a demonstration field, and that's how you convince people of the benefits of adopting this? Because in cultures where they've never done that before, I would think that there would be some cultural barriers to trying to get people to handle their own waste when usually...
Yeah, it depends. We found that with rural communities, it's quite easy to have that as an entry point, because they're so used to, they use animal manure already as fertilizer. There's poultry manure, and so they know it's a fertilizer. And like in Niger, there was a project where they started only with the urine, collecting the urine, applying it to the fields, and showing the difference it made. And people were convinced quite quickly, and they collected all the urine they could. And then you can go to the next step and then add the feces and show what can be done with that. But it's harder when it comes to the urban situation. In the cities, the person who has the toilet has no use for the fertilizer. So you have this disconnect. And there you need to have a collection system that the user pays a fee so that it's collected, and then the collection company would move it and sell it to the farmer. And this is what we're currently trying to work out. You know, there's some research to be done. How do you really do it in the urban situation? And I've actually put there a book on, it's called Sustainable Sanitation in Cities. So that's the hard part, where the field is too far away to just show it to people.
You need people buying the urine off of the people producing it.
Yeah, that's right. But there we often come with other arguments where we say, look, the odor is so much less that you can have the toilet indoors. And that is a big plus, especially for women. In developing countries, often the toilet is far away, or in schools, it's far on the other side of the yard. And the girls, when they go to it, or when it's dark, they get attacked, and it can be dangerous. So if you can say, well, this type of toilet you can have right next to your classroom, then that's, you know, an advantage, totally different one, but it might be the selling point for this. And I mean, we're not trying to push this onto anyone. We're just saying, just consider it as an option when you look at different options. For, you know, this is one of them, and there could be situations where it's not suitable, and others where it will be.
You mentioned you used the urine fertilizer. Barry mentioned the salicity issue. How do you overcome that in a developing context?
The salinity?
Yeah.
We found it's not a problem. I mean, you also mentioned when you apply it often and you dilute it, or you You need also to irrigate at the same time with water. Don't think that the urine is also your water. And when I speak...
The urine's not your sole irrigant. It's only a supplement. I noticed on one of the slides Elisabeth had, she had a system called fertigation, where you're using fertiliser injected into your irrigation water. And that's quite easy technology to do. So you're mixing a little bit of fertiliser into your irrigation.
And I was told by colleagues who are into this agricultural thing that any fertilizer can give you salinity issues. It's not specific to urine as a fertilizer. So they're quite...
Most common fertiliser that the farmer's using is urea. They're doing the same thing in soil by putting on solid urea. And the soil processes actually do the same process that the urease is doing in the toilets and the urine storages. There is actually some dangers there, other dangers as well. You know, you get a little bit of loss of nitrous oxides and things like that, which are very potent greenhouse gases. But it's again ameliorated by putting on little bits often with big dilutions.
Can I just say something about phosphorus as well? How much do people know about phosphorus? Is that well known that it's going to be a problem?
Peak phosphorus.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So because we talked only about nitrogen so far, but the phosphorus is going to be tricky. So you see the fertilizer consumption, how it's going up, and it means a lot more phosphorus is needed. And here I've got another chart that shows going back in time. 1950s is really when it started that the phosphate rock was started to be mined in much larger quantities than before, and there's only a few countries that have phosphate rock, and one of them is Morocco and West Sahara, and we might get to a point where we all depend on their phosphorus, and that's not going to be good. But anyway, it's not going to run out suddenly, but it just will get more and more expensive, and the developing countries will be the first that won't be able to afford it. We can still afford it longer. Then there is also phosphorus that is contaminated with uranium. And again, that's not good for health, but the developing countries will probably start using that out of desperation and then perhaps export that to our countries, so not good.
And potassium is not much different to phosphorus.
Is it? No, I didn't know that.
Most sources of potassium are actually fossil coral reefs, and there aren't too many of those types of deposits left. So potassiums are probably only about 20 years behind phosphorus, if that. So, and that's one of those high demand macronutrients we get.
Great. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Okay.